talk about security. A year ago, the National Cyber Security Centre was created to protect the UK from online attacks. And its first year has been intense, with incidents affecting the NHS, businesses, and even fears over the election. And its chief still thinks there could be worse to come. Well, the Centre's chief exec, Kieran Martin, has been talking exclusively to the BBC's security correspondent, Gordon Carrera.
Of the 590 incidents we dealt with in our first year, the vast majority were Category 3, but there were several dozen Category 2 attacks. But we have yet to move to the full, what we call national emergency, where, for example, there may be a risk to life, where a hostile state may be launching a very, very serious attack. And we've always said that we can expect in the next few years a Category 1 attack.
And that could be an attack on the democratic system or on the critical national infrastructure, power, electricity, something like that is what we're talking about.
I think those are the two areas that we've seen the greatest threat to, not just in terms of what we've been worried about as we've monitored intrusions against the UK, but also we've seen those attacks realised in other countries.
Well, let's talk to Professor Bill Buchanan from Edinburgh Napier University, and you're an expert, Bill, on cybercrime. How are you?
I'm fine, yeah.
Now, we all get these bizarre emails and strange phone calls, but this is much bigger. You know, you're kind of picturing somebody in a different country, you'd imagine Russia or wherever, trying to hack into a system here. What's happening? Who's doing all this stuff?
Well, there are many sort of agencies that are involved in this type of thing. So it can be nation states. They obviously have large budgets, and sometimes they're just probing to see how they can get through the defences. But there are also hacktivists and so on that have political motives. And there are people that generally just find this kind of thing fun and will probe around the internet. I think what the NCSC is looking at is this worry around the Category 1, which would attack our critical national infrastructure. And I think things like power, health, transport would collapse if we didn't have a proper IT infrastructure.
How are they doing this? I mean, you know, we've interviewed people who have had these encryption programs sent into the computers. And I think it happened to our health services too, where, you know, pay us 10 million quid and you can have your data back. How do they do it? How do they actually get into, let's say, the BBC servers or Scottish Power servers or the Scottish Government servers? How do they do that?
So if we take it that I target you, so if I know who you communicate with, I know a little bit about you, then I might send you an email that you might think is from your ISP or from your wife. Say, I then trick you to click on a link. The link itself then downloads a backdoor onto your computer. Then the intruder can get into your computer and then survey the rest of the network. With something like the encryption methods, we're looking at ransomware, where they can install a program that goes and encrypts your files, and only one magic decryption key can actually decrypt that. So the intruder can hold the company to ransom to say that you're not getting your files back unless you pay some money.
What's the big threat now?
The big threat is definitely energy, power. If someone was to bring down the energy supplies in Edinburgh and Glasgow,
how would they do that?
They would collapse. They could do that by logging into the systems which controls the electrical power supplies, get into the power stations, trip one of the power stations, which could cause a cascade effect. I think we've seen it in Ukraine, where it's thought that Russian activists went after the Ukrainian energy supplies and managed to bring down parts of the network. And what you'll find with the electrical network is that if you trip one part, then the rest of it can collapse like a house of cards. We've seen things like Capita, where if there's been a power failure in a small part of the network, it can actually collapse the whole of the infrastructure. So it just needs a little pinpoint of activity to actually compromise the whole of the infrastructure.
You're explaining this really well. Nation states or people who just want to annoy you or people who want your money can send you an email purporting to be from a friend. You click on a link, and when you do that, a program goes on your computer where they can get into your system. Let's say you're a power company. They can get into your system and they can shut down the power outlets or whatever, or they can mess it up. What's the financial gain for them?
So the financial gain obviously, if you're a nation state, then you might be at war, or you might have some political issues with the country that you're dealing with. But obviously, if it's financially motivated, then if you can lock the files, or you can say that there is some piece of ransomware installed on the network, the files won't be released until they pay the ransom. So it's happened quite recently that movies have been released from movie studios, and the hacker has asked for a ransom to be able to not release those files onto the internet. So there are many ways that cyber criminals can make a business out of attacking systems.
I know you and people like you and experts have said, well, you've got to be very careful and have your firewalls and have your security be policed very closely. But there's a school of thought that we should go back to paper records.
I think that would be almost impossible. I certainly couldn't do my job without email, the web. We're moving towards a paperless society. The drive towards this is increasing in our public services. Why we even vote on paper is still a strange thing in the 21st century, when countries like Estonia now have electronic voting. The electronic voting and electronic systems themselves should be safe and safer, and it's just usually the methods that are used to implement it which can be a compromise. So I think this drive towards using electronic systems is definitely something that needs to increase. And Scotland, I think, has the possibility to actually move into a new generation where our whole public sector is online.
Bill, thank you. Professor Bill Buchanan from Edinburgh Napier University.